Well, let's talk to one of Nigel Farage's colleagues in the Reform Party. It is, of course, the one and only Mr Ben Habib, who's a deputy leader. Ben, you're the only senior member of Reform yesterday who didn't get a new title. Very good morning to you. I mean, you've got a new chairman, you've got a new leader. You've managed to continue with your position. Obviously, you are the strong and stable version of the Reform Party.
Yeah, well, I mean, deputy leader positions taken. Where do you go, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, there can be no doubt that that whatever was the reason that Nigel Farage decided to change his mind, it certainly kick-started the election, as the front pages of the papers have all attested to this morning.
Well, I think it's fantastic. Nigel really should have thrown his hat in the ring 10 days ago. I was very disappointed when Nigel said that Thursday morning that he wouldn't be standing and he'd be fighting the American elections. But I'm delighted that he's gone around the country, he's listened to people, and he can feel a groundswell. I can feel it, in my own constituency. I won't mention the name for fear of Electoral Commission consequences for talk. But, when you walk around the streets, people are saying they're not going to vote Tory and they're going to vote me. And that's a remarkable thing. People just coming up to me and saying, I'm voting for you. And Nigel can feel that. Richard can feel it. And it's not showing up in the polls. Remember, the polls only, the only results the poll give you are the ones based on people who say they are going to vote. What they don't say, what they don't reflect are people who are at the moment disenfranchised. And as we head towards the actual polling day, if we can get our message across and people realize we are the genuine small C Conservative Party, we will get people off their sofas into the polling booth. They won't be voting Labour, for whom they have no love. They won't be voting Tory, which most people now hold in contempt. They will be voting Reform UK. And I think something really quite substantial and seismic is happening at the moment.
But it might be happening, Ben, but it's not registering anywhere. And I know you said the polls aren't showing it, but I'm looking this morning at this poll in the Times. It's a YouGov MRP survey. These are the people that got it right last time in 2019. And they've actually got, the possibility of Plaid Cymru and the Greens getting a couple of seats, but they haven't got anything for Reform. So despite whatever the wave is that you're feeling and you're hearing, it's not being represented in this national poll whatsoever. And this is the one that says that Labour are going to get a bigger victory than Blair in 1997. If anything, it would suggest that actually what Reform will do is increase the Labour majority.
Well, there can, by definition, be no increase in the Labour majority. What we have in Parliament at the moment are two globalist parties of varying shades of grey. They both believe in, giving power over to the WHO, the UN, the European Union, governing through the G7, etc. They don't believe in democratic governance at the national level. They make policies such as net zero, diversity, equality and inclusion, all this kind of nonsense, again, at the global level. They don't make policies for the British national interest and for the United Kingdom. And that is the defining difference between ourselves at Reform UK and both the Conservative and Labour Party. So actually, personally, Mike, I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference whether the Conservatives are in office or the Labour Party, because they govern in exactly the same way. What this country desperately needs is a 180-degree change in attitude to the way taxes are imposed, to immigration, to net zero, as I mentioned, to the fact that everyone's equal, two-tier policing, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, but realistically, Ben, you may say that you're the one party that stands for all of that, but unfortunately the system is against you, and Nigel Farage has accepted that in a way. He feels it's a struggle for him to even win the one seat that he's standing in, and if he's got the most chance of becoming an MP, then it doesn't look that great for Reform elsewhere. Now, he's always said, and he said to us when he was in here last week, that his previous encounters with standing as an MP have all been about kind of disrupting the status quo, have all been about influencing policy in the other parties. But if Reform only wins one or two seats, the influence isn't really there, is it?
Well, one or two seats is seats in Parliament, and that would be the first time, I think, Reform... Did UKIP actually win one from scratch? I don't think it did.
Douglas Carswell, I think, did win a by-election when he was, he'd become a UKIP MP, and I think he did then win the by-election.
Yeah, but he didn't stand initially as, he had been an MP, hadn't he, already?
Yes.
the point was made by one of your previous, I think it was a voice message you had, that the Labour Party was the insurgent party 100 years ago, and it started with 1 or 2 seats. All long marches start with a single step. And of course, it's very difficult for us to get seats in first past the post system. But the point I'm making is that the vast majority of people are fed up with all of the above parties. And if we can get our message across to them, which we are, by the way, and if they come out and vote for us, then I think the polls will be proven to be wrong. And once we get above 20% in the polls, assuming we get there before the general election, then you start winning seats. And once you start winning seats, that's a very dramatic difference to the outcome, the shape of the outcome of the Commons. It won't be a thumping Labour majority. If we get 1 seat, it's because it's not a thumping Labour majority. If we get 5 seats, you're looking at a completely different complexion in the House of Commons. And you're seeing the insertion of a genuinely pro-British voice for the first time. And I think we're going to get there. And even if we don't get there, Mike, you do not try for fear of failure.
No, absolutely right. Although you know, a week ago, Nigel Farage was saying exactly that he wasn't going to try because he didn't think he had enough time to prepare for the campaign. He now thinks he does have enough time to prepare for the campaign. But because all the other parties that you're up against, the 2 main parties in particular, would stress all the same things that you've just said, except they just say them in a slightly different way. They would say, you know, we know how to govern the country, nobody else does. That's what the Tories are saying. The Labour Party say, well, the Tories are fed up, Tory voters are fed up even with the Tories, and basically people want to have a change. And the change that they want is the Labour Party. And the Lib Dems would no doubt say the same thing as well. But let's have a look at what Nigel Farage told us about what he was going to do last week.
But I will be going to America a fair bit for the last few months of this year. For some reason, don't ask me why, but for some reason, an awful lot of grassroots Americans with mildly conservative views like me.
Yes.
Know me and like me.
They do. Well, it's the Trump effect to some extent.
And I was able, in 21, when I toured there for 6 weeks, I was actually able to go to events and to say to people, right, who's going to volunteer?
Right.
Who's going to volunteer to deliver leaflets, to knock on doors, to make phone calls? And people stood up and volunteered.
Yeah.
So if I can help with the campaign on the grassroots side of things, above all, that's what I'm going to do.
Do you think he's still going to do that if he becomes an MP? And if he doesn't, or whatever is the cause of what happens on July the 4th, did he partly make this decision, do you think, Ben, because he thought that perhaps the Trump sort of guarantee is not quite as good as it was last week even?
Well, I don't imagine that's the reason. I think Nigel has been going up and down the country. He's been meeting people. He's been getting the feedback, which I described. And I think he's realised, as I did and Richard did and others, that actually this is a really critically important election. We've got to ensure that we get our kind of voice into Parliament. And the only way of doing that is to stand and lead from the front. And I think that's a realisation that Nigel has come to. It's taken a while to get there. You know, he wasn't in frontline politics, if you like, in the same way that Richard and I were and our colleagues have been for the last couple of years. But he's now been on the streets. He's met the people. He's got the feedback. And, you know, we need to swing this bat.
The other big story, of course, at the moment is what's happening in the selection process for all parties, because, you know, the Tory party are having problems with flying in various different sort of, you know, what you might call carpetbaggers into seats that they think they'll be able to retain. Labour, of course, as well, having trouble having to get rid of some people. The Green Party had to deselect 3 people that they were going to put in front of the electorate for anti-Semitism problems. Reform have had problems before, having to deselect people after having been advised that they had said things or liked things on social media. Have you got a complete set of selected candidates that you're comfortable with, do you think, yet?
I believe we have, yeah. We've got as close to 630, if not 630. I haven't checked in the last couple of days. But, you know, last Thursday, the Conservative Party, which called this election, remember, last Thursday it hadn't filled something like 150-odd seats. And they're still, you know, trying to get their candidature together. Look, a party like ours is going to have much more difficulty getting 630 candidates as an insurgency than a Conservative Party or the Labour Party who've been established and have been interviewing for the last few years. And they go through their processes, you know, relentlessly. But it's not really about whether or not we've got an ideal set of candidates. What we've got is some really fantastic fantastic candidates across the country, and we've got supporting candidates in every single seat. And we are going to take this fight to the Conservative Party. We're going to take this fight to the Labour Party. We are going to change the way politics is practiced. This general election is going to be very different to any we've had before. 2015, yes, UKIP stood, but the Conservative Party was popular. 2019, the Brexit Party stood down and gave Boris Johnson his 80-seat majority. This time round, we are standing in every seat in Great Britain, and the Conservative Party, rightly, is incredibly unpopular, and the Labour Party is not loved either. And I think you're going to see something very, very extraordinary.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating 4 weeks ahead, I have to say that. Thank you very much indeed, Ben Habib, the Deputy Leader of the Reform Party.